As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized SEMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a SEMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the SEMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study exam. Start studying the SEMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Good evening, professional colleagues, friends of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, our students, ladies and gentlemen. Great to be back on the show after a very short break to attend to one or two things. But I sincerely want to appreciate all our viewers who has held on to make sure that they are there and for all the calls I received. Yeah, I'm just out there doing what should be done. But great to be back on the show after some little break of episode. And we are here today to talk on another topical issue of which we know you bring to you every Tuesday and Thursday. And today we are back again on sustainability. But today we'll be looking at sustainability and climate change, the Nigerian perspective. And I brought a seasoned erudite scholar, a professional, seasoned professional, who is vast with this topic. No other person, a friend of the house, Mrs. Tomi Adepoju. She is a partner and head of enterprise risk, ESG services at KPMG in Nigeria. She has about 25 years of experience in providing advisory service in sustainability and ESG, corporate governance, enterprise risk management, internal audit, and regulatory compliance services. She has successfully led several transformation, large-scale projects in major national, corporate, and multinational organizations across diverse sectors. This includes services related to carbon emission reduction strategy, sustainability strategy, and impact assessment services for leading players in several industries, including FSR. She was a key member of the technical committee set up by the Financial Reporting Council to review the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, where she also led the KPMG team, providing technical secretarial assistance to the committee. She has facilitated several retreats and training for board of directors, senior management of several organizations, including the Institute of Directors of Nigeria, Society of Corporate Governance of Nigeria, and the Financial Institution Training Center. She has a degree in chemical engineer from the University of Benin in Nigeria, a fellow of our great institute, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, possesses a certificate in risk management assurance from the Institute of Internal Auditor and board readiness certificate from the IE Business School, Spain. She also has several certifications in GRI, that is G4, sustainability reporting process. I can tell you for free that our guest today, she's the right person to attend to this particular topic on sustainability and climate change, the Nigerian perspective. But in my usual tradition, it will be a great privilege and opportunity for you to promote your goods and services on this platform because we have our members, non-members, globally connected, listening to this topical issue. And on that note, I want to go on a very short break. When I come in, I'll be coming in with our guest for today as we do justice to the topic. Don't go anywhere. Get your pen and get set because we'll be right back shortly. Welcome back. Welcome back. And my great pleasure to have you, Mrs. Tommy Adepoju FCA. Good evening and welcome on ICAN on AIR.
Good evening, Sheson. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me back.
Yeah, we are back. And the topical issue that we have everywhere is sustainability, sustainability, sustainability. But today we'll be looking at sustainability and climate change, the Nigerian perspective. And permit me to start this way, by saying that sustainability and climate change have always been a subject of joint discussion in recent time. And as events keeps unfolding, it appears that it will not change anytime soon. Our global audience that connected globally have received numerous insight on the subject, and sometimes we wonder if they convey the same meaning. We are blessed to have you as a person, considering your class on the show. Could you please educate us on what sustainability and climate change depicts and then bring out the major distinction in the two subjects?
Thank you very much for that very great question. I'll start by saying sustainability, if I define it in plain terms, is meeting our own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So how we live today matters to what will happen to the future generation. And this definition, even though it may sound cliche, but it's the bedrock upon which sustainability is founded upon. Now, in the past, we've used the word sustainability, sustainability. These days, you would hear a lot of people using the word ESG, meaning environmental, social, and governance. They mean the same thing. It's just that environmental, social, and governance, it's a better measure of what we are talking about. It's easier to measure and it's easier to quantify the environmental, social, and governance aspect. So people are beginning to steer more towards using ESG than sustainability. Now to climate change. Climate change can be defined as the change in weather conditions over a long period of time and typically results in two categories of risk: transition risk and physical risk. The rising global mean temperature, the droughts, the floods in coastal regions like we have in Nigeria, the storm surge, the agricultural yield losses are all examples of physical climate change risk. On the other hand, transition risk arising from the consideration for change that would occur while transitioning to a low carbon economy are what you would typically refer to as transition risk. And examples of those could be climate policy or regulation shift issues, customer preferences, or emerging technology and decline in the investments in carbon intensive sectors. Those are typical transition. They are temporary. They are not going to be there forever. That's the distinction. And so when you look at sustainability, it's increasingly driving the focus on the need to address a number of issues that impact human operations in the environment. But it goes beyond the environment. It also covers social and governance related issues. So on a holistic approach, it's all of these three areas that you're looking at when you're looking at sustainability. Whereas when you're talking about climate change, it's just one aspect of sustainability. It falls within the environmental area. And for example, if you look at the recent flood we had in Nigeria that ravaged about 27 states and displaced about 1.3 million Nigerians from their homes, that's partly attributable to climate risk issues. We can also see how the activities of oil and gas companies have degraded the water bodies in Niger Delta, and that has crystallized into issues that have depleted their source of income, as well as agricultural value chains. So that translated from an environmental issue to social issues for us. And of course, if you look at even Lake Chad, that has shrunk over time, those are examples of climate issues. So I hope that really clears the air between the distinction in the two definitions.
A beautiful way to start the program, I must say, Mrs. Adepoju. It gives a great insight, bringing out the distinction between sustainability. Even you've alluded to that. It's no longer sustainability. I think people go the route of the ESG, environmental, social, and governance. I'm talking about climate change, some of the things you've said. But I want to go this by saying, even from the way you have explained the definition of the two topic before us, it seems to be very, very deep. And I want you to kind of highlight to us the basic features of sustainability as it relates to climate change.
Okay, thank you very much. I would say the growing effect of climate change all over the world has left a lot of countries struggling, especially as it relates to environmental challenges. And I typically like to give an example that brings in all of the three factors, the E, the S, and the G, and we can then see how that impacts us. And so every year we see the issue of flooding in Nigeria. You know, I mean, this year it's ravaged. Normally at some point it was really more middle belt and some aspect of the north. Now we've seen it a lot in the south, and it's beginning to affect everybody. Based on research that people have done to find out what the root cause is, it was found out that this is really as a result of some governance issues that we didn't really pay attention to. So sometimes in the 80s or thereabouts, I think the Cameroonian government decided to build a dam to be able to manage, improve their water basin, sort out irrigation and improve their farming. And they approached the Nigerian government on what they wanted to do so they could seek agreement, because that would have impact on us. And we also, we saw it and we agreed that, oh, that's good. We should also do the same, probably build a dam in the north. And the size of the dam was going to be 3 times or thereabout more than even the one Cameroon was going to do, and was going to serve as an irrigation source for the north, so that agricultural products can even yield more for us as a nation. So, and they were also going to utilize it for hydroelectricity. But so that started, the dam started to be built. At some point in time, it was abandoned, just as we normally see some projects abandoned in Nigeria.
Abandoned projects in Nigeria.
Yes, until today, that dam has not been completed. So what happens annually is that when Cameroon releases water from their own dam, our own dam was meant to absorb that water and then we utilize it. But because we didn't build our dam, that then creates problems, and then it washes down and we start having flooding and all sorts of issues. So what was the root cause? The root cause was a governance issue that crystallized into environmental issues because you now have flood all over the place. And then because of that, houses are destroyed, human lives are lost, people's farming activities, economic activities are actually affected. One of the key investors in Nigeria, Olam, that had invested into rice in the north, talked about how much they lost from the investment that they've made. And so that also has crystallized into a social issue and economic issue. And so this issue, all of them are all interrelated, and we can see the impact of some of those things in what we do. If you look at Lagos, we are in a coastal environment. All of the cities along the coastal areas are all beginning to experience issues because we have ocean surge issues. And it's causing the ocean surge issues. It is as a result of climate change because our temperatures have risen over time. And this is also what has caused earthquakes, landslides in a number of places. So the attempt to control the climate change so that it can be well regulated is really an attempt to ensure that we don't continue to face some of these adverse things that we are seeing today. Because if we continue the way we are living, the world population is increasing. As we increase, the usage of resources are also increasing, and that continues to create issues for us. So if we do not begin to control the impact of the usage on the climate, we will continue to face some of these issues that we're talking about.
Sincerely speaking, that's a great submission, and I think I'll pick it from there. Talking about the climate change, we've seen that the climate change effort is geared towards the stabilization of the ozone layer, and to achieve this, there has been some radical changes in the energy source, which you have given us some little insight while you are making your submission. With a view of educating our viewers, Mark, could you please explain some available energy sources around the world and their implication on the ozone layer, looking at this climate change that we're talking about?
All right, thank you very much. I would say, broadly speaking, energy sources can be categorized into two main sources, renewable energy sources as well as non-renewable energy sources. So renewable energy sources are those that can be replenished and they are considered to be sustainable, while non-renewable energy sources are energy sources that are finite and eventually will run out. If we look at examples of what you would classify as renewable energy sources, you will have things that are more natural and probably some of them will be in abundance around us. For example, you have the sun, from which you can get solar energy. You have the wind, which you can utilize to create wind energy. You have hydro. We have that in Nigeria. The Kanji Dam is an example of hydro energy that we're generating. Tidal is using the sea to be able to create energy sources. You also have biomass, where we are using waste to be able to produce energy. So the refuse that we dump and create into heap dumps all over the place can actually be utilized in producing energy. And then, of course, you can also have geothermal heat. So there are a number of renewable energy sources that are in abundance, and they are there by nature, and so you are really not depleting them. And then you also have the non-renewable energy sources, like the oil and gas that we also have in abundance in Nigeria, the coal that we also have as well. Those are also example of non-renewable energy sources. Some will also say nuclear power is an example, as well as gases. So you have those two classifications. If we look at in Nigeria now, we've seen a number of people beginning to look at solar energy. So sometimes when you look at people's houses or even the street lights, you can see some panels that are being used to store energy and then transmit to power when the sun has gone down. So that's an example of a renewable energy. We've talked about hydro as well. So all of these different sources of energy abound, and most people believe that the renewable energy source is much better because it does not deplete our ozone layer or create emissions that can become harmful to us over time. Coal is the dirtiest form of fossil fuel and is responsible for about 0.3 degrees Celsius of the 1 degree Celsius increase in the global average temperature. And so that's why a lot of people are trying to say, don't look at coal. But of course, if coal is your, if
Your
coal
major,
abounds in your
so much
country,
in your country, yeah.
definitely would not want to listen to that. You then have to look for other means to be able to manage whatever issues may crystallize.
That's a beautiful submission, madam. And I want to tell our audience I'm guesting Mrs. Tomi Adepoju, FCA, and we are talking on sustainability and the climate change in Nigerian perspective. And she has made us to understand we are gradually moving away from using sustainability all the time, but we use the three cardinal points: ESG, that is the environment, the social, and the governance. I'm sure I'm a good learner, madam, from some of the things that you are telling us. And I want to believe that my audience too are picking them up. But let's proceed before I start requesting questions from our audience. This is very topical and very key to us. We know last year the UN COP conference was held in Egypt, and the conference centered a discussion on redefining climate change regime around the world. Could you please educate us on the global audience on the major takeaway from the conference and how the conference impact on Africa, most especially our great country, your country and my country, Nigeria?
All right, thank you very much. A number of key takeaways from COP27. The first, I would say, was the establishment of a dedicated fund for loss and damage. Just as you know, a number of African countries, Nigeria inclusive, have been asking the global world that, I mean, we didn't create these issues. So why should you tell us to stop producing our own oil and gas that is in abundance? You have actually industrialized over time. We are just trying to industrialize. So when you tell us to stop doing some of the things we are doing, that means you are telling us we shouldn't industrialize. And so how do you want to pay us back for the issues you've caused in, I mean, as it relates to climate change over the years that you have been industrializing? And so as a result of that, all sorts of conversations have been happening over the years. And this, I mean, for 2027, what was then done was that they would establish an agreement to provide loss and damage funding for vulnerable countries that have been hit hard by floods, by droughts, and other climate disasters. This was widely lauded as a historic decision because of before now, it's always just been talk around, skirting around it, but not something concrete. The issue now is that now we've established this. What next? What needs to be done to be able to access it? And those are some of the things that would then need to happen going forward. The other thing that was achieved at COP27 was the maintenance of a clear intention to keep 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach in terms of the temperature that we need to maintain, the global temperature that we need to maintain. As you well know, the global temperature has been rising, and that has caused changes in weather, even in Nigeria here. Before, when we were all growing up in primary school or secondary school, you could say the rainy season starts from X and ends in Y, and this is when the dry season starts. It rained about a week ago or so. We never used to see rain in January or February. It was unheard of. And so even our own climate has changed in this place. And the kind of heat that we're experiencing now, it never used to be this hot. And so there's that's rising temperature. We are also feeling it even here in Nigeria. And so there's a clear intention to ensure that if we keep the temperature at 1.5 degrees Celsius within which countries then need to begin to look at mitigating strategies of what they need to do to bring down their greenhouse gas emissions so that we do not go beyond that. The third thing is also mobilization of more financial support for developing countries. As you will agree with me, finance is at the heart of all that we're doing all over the world to combat climate change. And so being able to mitigate, adapt, look at our loss and damage, as well as come up with new climate technologies, will require funding. Solar energy, for example, at the on-take, it looks extremely expensive. How can we even begin to manufacture our own panels and other things here in a large scale such that it brings down the cost? So those are part of the financial supports that are being looked at for developing countries. There's also the issue of focus on accountability for businesses and institutions, meaning that the businesses, shareholders, and even other stakeholders will begin to hold businesses and institutions more accountable for what they are doing, reducing greenwashing, whereby, you're just ticking the box and coming out to say, oh, I've done X, Y, and Z. I've reduced my greenhouse gas emission. But at the end of the day, when you lift the veil, nothing has actually been done. It's all just color coding all over the place. So those are a number of the things that we were able to achieve at COP27. The hope is that when we then get into COP28, we will be able to get more. From a Nigerian perspective, incidentally, I was at COP27. And for me, one of the key takeaways, when I looked at Egypt, I noticed that they had they were making use of different sources of energy, solar energy. Even their airport, part of their airport was powered with solar. They made good use of their ocean. They had tidal waves, tidal energy also. All the buses were powered. The buses were all electricity powered. None was working based on oil and gas. And so you then begin to wonder that in Nigeria as well, we have abundant sun. We could actually do more in the area of solar. We have lots of wind in the north. How do we get involved in utilizing that for wind energy? We have our ocean. Can we utilize that more to even also be able to generate energy? So we do have the natural resources here. And if you look at what Egypt has done, we actually have quite a number of things to copy and also get done here.
That is a great one, madam. And I can tell you that once we have the political will, the abundance of the materials needed, like you said, it's available with us. And thanks for the insight from some of the take home from the COP27. Sincerely speaking, when you spoke about the issue of the climate change, those days you can guess when it will rain, when it will be the other season. I was talking to someone, I thought they've digitalized the process up there since everything is getting digitalized and things are changing. But thank God that you are giving more insights to this to let us know that it is the climate change that we are moving on. While I await the question of our viewers, let me state here that I'm guesting Mrs. Tomi Adepoju, FCA. She's been doing justice to the topic of today, which is sustainability and climate change, the Nigerian perspective. I'll take this question and I'll open the floor for questions from our audience. Madam, it's been established that African contributed only 2 to 3% of the greenhouse emission that creates climate change problem. This actually suggested that Africa is the only continent causing depletion of the ozone layer. Then the world will be a safer place to live. And given a diversity of the resources required to tackle the climate change menace, will you suggest that African countries should bother themselves less about climate change issues? Since we contribute lesser, should we bother ourselves less?
Definitely not. Like some of the examples we've given in the past, we are already seeing the effect of climate change, even in Africa, in a number of countries. We've talked about Lake Chad. The coverage area of Lake Chad about 50 years ago is not where it is today. It has shrunk significantly, and that has created a lot of issues as it relates to even farming activities have reduced, fishing activities have reduced. A lot of the people there have economic issues that they are facing. And that has also translated into other issues where you then have a lot of people that don't have work to do, idle hands. They say it's the devil's workshop. And then begin to utilize the people and turn them in different directions. And so we are facing those issues today. Even in our own country, we all know how bad beach used to be several years ago. We know what it is today because the coast, the ocean actually eroded and ate up the land. And so we cannot say we will turn a blind eye. It's been proven that Africa's temperature increased from 20.5 degrees Celsius to 21.5 degrees Celsius over between 2011 and 2021. And this trend is common among a lot of continents. There's projection that it will continue to rise if you don't do something about it. And it's very simple. The world is a global village. A gas that's, emissions in Europe does not stay only within Europe. Gas moves. It will definitely go to other places. So you cannot isolate yourself from what is happening. A 2 degrees Celsius of global warming scenario would cause significant changes in extreme temperatures across sub-Saharan Africa. And so we cannot turn a blind eye on climate-related issues just because it does not affect us in the same proportion. Rather, what we should be asking ourselves is, how can we make good use of that fund that has now been set up? How can we push to ensure that we can access it? With a lot of the African countries are coming together and trying to, push for those to happen. We also noticed that I think immediately after the COP27, our vice president, together with a number of African leaders, came together to say we have a lot of forests in Africa. It's that forest that's actually reducing the carbon footprints of other developed world. How can we begin to monetize that forest and also have a carbon market that we can also begin to sell our credits to other people and make money out of it? And thank God for the birthing of the National Council on Climate Change. As we begin to look into all of these directions and we start having all of those, Africa would benefit more because we can then because we have our forest in abundance. But of course, if we also keep cutting and cutting, it will also continue to get. Yes, so there are a number of things we need to do to be able to ensure that we also manage and keep our own emissions between that 2 to 3% GHG emissions. Otherwise, it can rise if we continue flaring our gases and doing some of the things that we are doing today. But the other things that we have that is an asset, we can also begin to monetize it more.
That is a good one. Stick within the range that we have currently by adhering to some of the instruction given by experts like you, so that we will not exceed it, so that we will not be impacted. And as African, we should not take our eyes off it. And thank God that our leaders are actually looking in the area of converting some of the natural resources by monetizing it. Let me take the question of Mr. Fagbola Temitope from the ancient city of Ibadan. This is one of our 5-star general. He do not at any point miss ICAN on air. And he's asking the question, sustainability and adaptability of Goal 7 of Millennium Development Goal, environmental sustainability. How far have we gone in Nigeria on the implementation?
Well, we are making progress. At least now we have we've been able to come up with a Climate Change Act, which seeks to actually pull together all the different policies we've had in different places over the years and pull everything together under a single umbrella for a single entity to be monitoring and provide oversight on. And based on that act, the National Council on Climate Change has now been set up. And because it's been set up, a DG has also been appointed to drive and run it, and they've started working already. If you look at the provisions within the Act, there are a number of things it expects organizations to begin to do to be able to manage and report on their carbon footprints. And so as the committee begins to work, we will start seeing the effect. So yes, there have been several things that have been done. It's at infancy, but now we are we've gotten our acts right. We've pulled everything together under an act, which is mandatory for everybody. And then we will begin to see what the committee will do. We know in Nigeria, when things are not mandatory, we won't really pay attention to it. But now that we have it as an act, we all need to look at it, and it covers everybody. So I think it's early days, but the committee is working, and we will definitely begin to see more effects going forward.
Oh, I'm sure Fatbola can now pick on that to know that we are not where we used to be when it comes to this sustainability or goal 7, but we are making progress. At least legislation to have the act to guide everyone and tell us certain things that is expected of us to do. To all our viewers, like I said, on this show today, I've been guesting Mrs. Tomi Adepoju, FCA, and we've been talking on sustainability and climate change, the Nigerian perspective. We've just picked a layer of the perspective with the question of Fagbola, and I'll be coming in to take more perspective of some of the things that we have done. But before then, permit me to go on a very short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with the show. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Welcome back. And for those of you that are just joining us, you've not missed so much, but I'm sure you can have a recap of this program because it's been very insightful talking about sustainability and climate change, the Nigerian perspective. And I can say Professor Tomi Adepoju, because the way she has been dissecting this is in a professorial position. And if you are just joining, I will encourage you to actually look at it again and again. Madam Tomi, pardon me that I refer to you as a professor, but you have just taken us to the class, and that's the way a professor will do. You're welcome back, ma. So like I said before we went on break, we need to look at the Nigerian perspective as related to this ESG and the climate change. We want to find out, where does Nigeria stand? And what should we as a nation be doing to address this sustainability as it relates to the climate change? You've just spoke about the issue of the act that we've been able to put together. What other things do you think we need to do?
Thank you very much. In terms of where we stand, I think the government has shown, at least from its current body language, that they are actively interested in progressing sustainability and in particular climate change in Nigeria. We've spoken about the establishment of the Nigeria Climate Change Act, which seeks to drive sustainable development in the nation, and the establishment of the council. Part of what the council is meant to do, or the act is meant to do, is to make provisions to establish what you call a climate change fund as a means of financial provisions. The fund is expected to be get funding from other international organizations and funds that are due to Nigeria for meeting our own goals. And also, they will get funded through fines and charges from private and public entities for flouting their climate change mitigation strategy, and also look at ways to adapt obligations and carbon tax and emissions trading in Nigeria. Now, there are other things that are also being done. There is the plan to set up an emissions trading scheme and a carbon tax framework by the Nigerian Council of Climate Change. That would mean that, I mean, carrot and stick. If you do X, you are able to have contribute into the into reducing your carbon, or you have carbon credits to be able to sell, then maybe you would get some tax impact as a result of that. So there will be that kind of carrots and stick going forward from the carbon tax framework, where some people that have excess and are looking for credits to buy to reduce the excess emissions that they are having, and will be able to buy from other people, and it becomes an opportunity for some others to be able to make money because they've been able to reduce their carbon footprint. We also have the energy transition plan with a target of net zero by 2060 that the federal government has committed to. And in 2021, the government also developed and submitted the nationally determined contributions to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, where we are saying we want to conditionally contribute 45 to 47% while retaining the unconditional target. So, and we also have the Renewable Energy Master Plan that's been put in place, that's saying that we want to be able to move supply of renewable electricity generation from 13% of total electricity generation in 2015 to about 23% by 2025 and 36% by 2030. So a number of initiatives have been put in place to enable us to be able to get there.
Yeah, it shows that our government are actually willing and not just sitting aback with this sustainability and climate change. Let me pick it. We've heard what the government are doing, and I think Adewale will want to know what he's asking the question: what can organization also do at their level to contribute to promoting the sustainability environment?
Yeah, I think organizations need to first of all identify what impacts or what are the effects their company activities have on ESG. And those impacts can be positive or negative. And so in doing that, you need to first of all take stock of where you are. What are the things that we are doing, whether in terms of our business model or in terms of the way we've structured ourselves, that are contributing negatively to climate change, and what do we need to do to be able to reduce that? When we do that, we then find out that climate change is not all negative. It can also be an opportunity, because risk is a risk we are dealing with. Risk always has the negative side, and it always also has the upside. Some people, as we speak today, are already looking at how they can benefit from the upside based on their business activities. We see a lot of companies today that have started looking at how to do more in the area of recycling. Some have looked at their energy usage and found ways to actually reduce their energy usage by looking at the mix of energy within their organization. So from solar, to in the past, maybe overly dependent on generators.
Generator.
And of course, light from PHCN. And then they've now found a way to see how they can move that and have more of solar as well. And so you see a lot of people doing initiatives. People are looking at how to reduce their recycling and are beginning to even make money from it. You have a lot of SMEs out there now that actually collect plastic bottles or plastic waste and pay you for doing that. But that needs to actually increase and grow in scale. The other day I saw there was an exhibition that was done, and we saw an organization that what they do is to turn used tires into chairs.
Chairs, yeah.
Very lovely chairs. When you see them, you want to put them in your sitting room.
Chairs and the tables, lovely.
Yes,
lovely.
Chairs and tables, lovely. They used old engine of cars to be able to make the tables. And so a lot of these things are springing up, And it's only when we begin to take stock of where we are currently that we can then see the places where we need to make amends and then of course education, so that our own people are also aware of what we are doing, how we can ensure that we are reducing our footprints, reducing our carbon emission, measuring the carbon emission that you have as an organization, and then coming up with a strategy in terms of how to begin to reduce that, whether things that are easily achievable in our scope 1 or scope 2, and then other things that we may not have so much control over in our scope 3.
Brilliant and very great. And let me quickly pick the question of Triple A. That is Abel I say, who is asking, how will this new Sustainability Act impact corporate reporting in the country?
Thank you. I think, yes, it will part of the provisions within the Act is to ensure that organizations that the Act covers begin to report on their carbon emissions going forward and what you're doing about it. Since it's an Act, it says that it's applicable to any organization that has more than 50 people as employees. So that means it's going to cover quite a lot of organizations in Nigeria. And so as a result of that, once they start coming up with the guidelines on how to begin to report, a lot of organizations would have no choice than to begin to report on it. And as you begin to report, you then find out that your reporting also enables your triple bottom line, because fund providers over there, a lot of organizations actually need funds and need to be able to access funds. The fund providers, a number of them have made ESG a prerequisite to be able to access the fund. And the only way they can know what you're doing is when you begin to report on the E, the S, and the G within the organization. So as we begin to report, it will drive that culture within the organization. It will also make us more attractive to be able to access a number of the funds that are out there that we've not been able to get access into, because we are really not telling the world what we are doing, because we don't have a strategic way of putting all of these things together and being able to report on it using a framework.
Awesome. And one thing I've always observed is time is not just always our friend. But I need to pick one or two other questions so that you can do, because it's very key. While you are explaining to us, one of the sources of climate change challenges is the emission of hydrocarbon from fossil fuel. And given that Nigeria relies heavily on crude oil for revenue, how badly do you see this effect of transition into cleaner energy on the Nigerian economy? Just give us a brief insight.
Okay, thank you very much. I think even before, several years ago, Nigerian government through NNPC had already started coming up with even their strategies in terms of how to begin to do the transition and have a renewable energy plan. One of the subsidiaries that NNPC has is a renewable energy company. So that thought has always been there. I don't think as a nation, what we're saying is that we are suddenly going to jettison our oil totally, because that's our main source of revenue. And of course, we cannot say we won't continue to look at our oil. I think what is being said is that how can we begin to ensure that we diversify such that we have a mix of the energy sources, and by the time we are also looking at renewable energy, whatever emissions we are having from the oil and gas, we can use the other aspect to try and reduce it and come to a balance. So according to a report by Carbon Tracker, the Nigeria government's oil and gas revenue is estimated to decline actually by about 20 to 40% over time. But if we also begin to make conscious efforts to then plan towards that by diversifying the economy and also even looking at other energy sources beyond the oil and gas, we will find out that we probably should be okay if we've been able to do that. Doing all of this, would help us to lessen the hurdles in terms of the journey towards a low carbon economy, while we are also hedging our risk. And so if we begin to have measures of how to generate, like the example I gave of Egypt, if we begin to take concrete steps and sustainable steps as well, not just that we start and then somebody else truncates it and then we move on. If we take concrete steps towards all of this, we find out that we're able to do that transition, not saying a complete transition, but do a mix such that we are balanced and we are able to generate revenue from all of the sources.
Great insight, I must say, Mrs. Adepoju. And I want to pick this, and I just want you to give your advice. We are warming up to elect new political leaders this 2023. Assuming we have the major contenders, the aspirant, watching this show this evening, of which you can never say they listen to at time. What is your suggestion to them on sustainability and climate change and the way it affects Nigeria in particular? What would be your advice?
Thank you very much. I would say the first advice is to ensure there is continuity in what currently exists.
Okay.
The council that has been set up is an arm of presidency, and it was done on purpose so that it can have visibility. If that continues, it gives a bite to whatever that council is doing, and they are able to run faster and be nimble. There are a number of things we've subscribed to as a country. It would be great, not nice, to ensure that there is continuity, so we don't keep having the stop and start culture that we seem to have had in the past. Beyond all of that, I would also say there is need to ensure that they drive the creation of new climate-driven policies and initiatives, and ensure the continued implementation of all of the ones we've had before. The government is saddled with that implementation because we've subscribed to a number of things as a country. We need to be able to show our scorecard to see that we are actually implementing those, and that's what would make us to be positioned to avail the funds that exist. A lot of funds exist out there that other countries are able to access. Even Ghana, beside us, is able to access a lot of climate change funds. But Nigeria is not really able to access it because we've not really positioned ourselves properly to be able to do that. So we need to focus on just transition, whether in the local context, in our rural areas, and just ensure that we are able to showcase that we are implementing all of the policies that we've put in place as a nation, and we are not deviating from them.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure if any one of them is listening, or their spokesperson, their PA, they have picked some of this advice talking about continuity. As we wind up, let me quickly pick Olutunji's question. Is asking if there are risks embedded in climate change and how can we effectively mitigate the risk in line with the global best practices?
Definitely, there are risks if we do not manage our environmental issues. We've talked about some of the risks, the flooding. In fact, if you look at the top 20, the top 20 risks based on the global risk report, you will find out that sustainability-related risk account for the top 10 out of all of them. Like the issues of COVID that we all had, that's a sustainability risk. The drought issues, the flooding issues, they are all sustainability related risk. And so we cannot afford not to manage those risks, either as an organization or as a country or even as a world at large. At the same time, while there are risks, there are also opportunities. A lot of organizations have developed second or third lines of revenues or revenue streams because they looked at the opportunity end of sustainability. So it's not always all about risk. Risk would always have the opportunity. And so we need to look at both ends, manage our risk, and then optimize the opportunities as well.
Oh, that is awesome. Sincerely speaking, it's been a great time with Mrs. Tomi Adepoju. Today I've conferred with professorship position, giving us deep insight into sustainability and climate change. Madam, in closing, ICAN is always open to ideas that will positively advance the growth of our members, the accountancy profession, and the Nigerian business environment. In your part, in short, what would be your suggestion or advice to ICAN on further discourse on sustainability and climate change, especially as it affects Nigeria and Africa as a whole?
Thank you very much, sir. And I would say ICANN has a major role to play. As we know, regulation is a major issue that affects us, and there are increasing regulations as it relates to sustainability. Even the push from shareholders and stakeholders as it relates to sustainability is quite a lot. I think as we're coming on stream today, I saw one news report about I think some shareholder actions on a particular organization, asking them that they are not doing as much as they should in the area of reporting on sustainability. We've seen shareholders not re-elect some directors as it relates to sustainability related issues. At the same time, when we look at the Institute, we have a lot of things to do. There are regulations coming up on reporting, both from the climate, from the climate, the Carbon Act that we spoke about, as well as IFRS S1 and S2 that FRC has said it's going to adopt. We have a role to play as accountants within our organizations to work together with our management to ensure we understand all of those standards and policies and begin to report on them. As auditors, we have a role to play in providing assurance on those sustainability reports when they are issued to ensure that there is no greenwashing and what organizations have put out there is indeed what they have done. And we also have a role to play in working with our regulators to educate them and ensure that we provide continuous support to them. And even from a tax perspective, as we begin to do more in the area of tax reporting, which is an area that globally there's been a lot done in terms of tax transparency. As accountants, we need to begin to look at how do we report on our tax ESG matters. And so if you look at our financial reports today, when you look at the financial reports, you will see that CIT has a prominent position. And when you then begin to benchmark organizations, you are in the area in terms of how much they are paying taxes as it relates to their revenue. You will tend to look at what has been disclosed on the face of the annual report to use to make that comparison. In fact, earlier in the year, there was a tweet that was going out saying that, oh, this organization made X in terms of revenue. However, they're only paying small taxes. While this other organization, the revenue was lower. However, the taxes they are paying was more. But what tax transparency tries to do is to say that there are other ways you are paying taxes that are not coming into that report. For example, every organization you would pay payee, there will be VAT, there will be withholding tax, there will be other taxes to local government and so on. If we actually aggregate all of those together and each organization can show how much they are actually giving out in terms of taxes and making an input into sustainable development within the country, it will go a long way to help us to even hold government more accountable. Because if you've collected X, how are you utilizing it in a transparent way? So as accountants, we also have a role to play in that regard, to not just look at transparency report from CIT alone, but look at all the other areas and begin to issue a tax transparency report going forward.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And it's on that note, we'll be bringing the show to a close. It's been a very wonderful time with our guest today, Mrs. Toby Adepoju, FCA. And I can see from the comment section, our members, our viewers appreciating you, telling you thank you. And like I said, I've benefited a lot on this topic today because you've been able to break them down one after the other. You are friend of the house. I'm sure when next you put a call through, you will definitely use your evening with us to come and educate our members on the current happenings as we have it. On that note, we want to appreciate all our viewers across the globe, from the northern part of the nation to the east, to the south, and to the west. Thank you for always being there every Tuesday and every Thursday by 6 to 7 p.m. And I promise I will always make myself available. Special thanks to the president, the 58th president, the governing council of our institute for this opportunity for our members to learn. Before I go, have you paid your subscription for the year 2023? Make sure you do that, because that is one of the reasons why we can make you to be a member of the institute. And to all those that are due for the fellowship conferment, visit the website to register for the fellowship conferment coming up in the month of April. On that note, we have cut it a short for today, Tuesday. Until I come your way again on Thursday, I remain your host, Olusegun Okwade, FCA. Bye for now.